Drink every time you hear the demonetization demons coming. Here's the thing. I wasn't planning on making a video about Bridgerton at all. Seriously. I haven't ever reviewed film or TV media on my channel, and I don't really plan to in the future. I am by no means an expert in film costume generally, or fashion in the Regency period. I am also usually super late to anything in the popular culture because I am secretly 400 years old. Last week, I couldn't think of a more contemporary song than Call Me Maybe. I just looked it up, and that song came out 9 years ago. My only thought about CosTube in general upon seeing this series advertised was, oh, I look forward to watching the YouTube videos about this series because I bet some CosTubers will have interesting things to say. And boy did they. Other, more qualified members of the CosTube community have already addressed the most salient points with regards to costume styling, history versus fantasy costuming, fat shaming, colorism and racism, and the ever-present corset-lacing sans chemise nonsense. All really great and important talking points, by the way. Links below. So with all that said, I didn't really have anything to contribute to this latest entry into the TV costume drama canon, or at least so I thought. I sat down to watch the first episode of the series in the first week of the new year, planning to enjoy the splendid visuals, maybe roll my eyes a little at the corset lacing scenes, and otherwise see if I wanted to keep up watching after that first episode. I was not in any way thinking about this channel. And then, alright, quickly to preface, I knew that the series had been based on a series of novels, mostly because I'd heard it mentioned casually in conversation. This was long before the show was released, so I kind of just forgot about it. I was going in with nothing but the trailer to go on, and I hadn't even really watched that. It just auto-played a lot when I opened Netflix that week. I went into the series entirely cold to plot and background, and somehow, during that first episode, began to get that feeling. I knew the beats to this story. There was a cadence to the plot and the dialogue, and the establishing of secondary characters, which suggested plots to come. I don't remember the moment, but suddenly a thought occurred to me. Maybe it was the Duke's childhood stutter, or maybe it was the tight-knit siblings named alphabetically. Maybe it was the moment they called each other by their Christian names. Maybe it was immediately upon introduction of a mysterious Duke with a reputation. I don't know, but when it came to me, it struck me with absolute certainty. This was a romance novel. I immediately Googled the books, and the search results page confirmed it. Yep, this is a series of romance novels about the whole catalog of Bridgerton siblings. And then I got so excited because we have now entered my wheelhouse. Before I knew it, half this script was madly written in a Google Doc at 2 in the morning by the faint glow of my rampant enthusiasm and my computer screen.
Editing Liz here to say that some of the elements of the script somehow got deleted, and I had no intention of deleting them, so I don't know what happened, but I didn't notice until after I filmed the video. So hopefully what I can do is intersperse these little rough and ready bits from Editing Liz and insert them where they should have been in the original video. So fingers crossed that we'll be able to do that a little bit smoothly, but sorry about the slight lack of polish with these particular points. Hopefully it's not too egregious.
The Bridgerton novels are written by Julia Quinn, starting in 2000 and then steadily released over the next few years. The first novel is The Duke and I, which is the basis for the first season of the series on Netflix. The series starts in 1813, and from what I can discern, it continues into the 1830s. The reading order of these novels, according to the first initial of the relevant Bridgerton sibling, is D, A, B, C, E, F, HG. I'm so sorry to the librarians, catalogers, and other alphabet-loving viewers among you.
I haven't read the books, and nor do I really plan to. Not that I don't think I would enjoy them, but just because my to-be-read pile is extraordinarily intimidating, and I don't feel like a Netflix special ought to dictate the books that get bumped to first place, and there have been books that have been patiently waiting their turn for quite a few years at this point. So I'm not reading them because I don't think they'd be good. I'm not reading them because I have so many books to read.
Based on the public response, combined with the fact that it was titled after the series, not the first book, I would not be in the least bit surprised if the show continued with further seasons based on subsequent novels. In fact, I imagine that this is the case.
Okay, a second season was officially announced between my recording this and releasing it, so you needn't talk about this prediction in the comments. This is the inherent risk in filming in advance.
Okay, so let's talk about why it's actually a big deal that a major Netflix headliner is an adaptation of a capital R romance novel series, and why you, dear reader, should care. This video centers on the Netflix series Bridgerton, but we're going to take the scenic route on our way to the series. We'll first talk about romance novels in general, my experience with them in particular, and then we'll talk about where Bridgerton fits into all of this. This video contains discussion of sexism and society's devaluing of women and female-coded media. As a result, there is some gendered language in this video, which is inextricably linked to the topic at hand. With very few exceptions, the economy, the film industry, the publishing industry, and society in general fundamentally ignore the existence of non-binary, trans, and intersex folk. I don't want anyone to think that the absence of these folks from this video means that there are no representations of non-cisgender people in romance or other literary genres, or that they aren't important in this discussion. It is simply beyond the purview of this video in particular. I have linked to a blog post below which recommends some books in the romance genre with specific representation of non-binary, trans, and other non-cis people. Better yet, they're all written by gender-diverse authors. While all genre definitions are slippery, when we talk about romance novels, we don't just mean a novel with a romance or love story featured in the plot somewhere. The definition as outlined by the Romance Writers of America, RWA, is as follows. Two basic elements comprise every romance novel: a central love story and an emotionally satisfying and optimistic ending. The central love story is described as the main plot centers around individuals falling in love and struggling to make a relationship work. A writer can include as many subplots as they want, as long as the love story is the main focus of the novel. The emotionally satisfying and optimistic ending is defined as, in a romance, the lovers who risk and struggle for each other and their relationship are rewarded with emotional justice and unconditional love. That second one is important in distinguishing romance from the novels of Nicholas Sparks, for instance, which have famously sad or bittersweet endings, and the first helps distinguish this genre from other fiction which includes a romance subplot, but it isn't the main driver of the story. For example, Bridget Jones's Diary centers more significantly on the personal growth of the narrator rather than on the love story. Historical or period romances are a particular favorite subgenre of the romance novel, and the Regency is a particular favorite for many authors. I'm not sure exactly why, but I can imagine there's a lot to be said for the Regency's strict social behavior tenets being a great backdrop for repressed desire and the difficulty of balancing social decorum and sexual impulses. There are an awful lot of dukes in these kinds of books. We also get to see the occasional Viscount, the Anthony Bridgerton, or Marquis, but a duke is the standard. There are many, many, many other subgenres, like a lot. But we're going to be concentrating on historical romance because we're talking about Bridgerton specifically. For the purposes of this video, I do not retroactively apply this definition to fiction published before the style was really codified. So despite fitting many of the characteristics, I do not include the novels of Jane Austen, for example. Critical theory and the literary world are very divided about this distinction, but I personally feel that just like it's virtually impossible to diagnose illnesses or assign gender and sexuality to historical figures, I believe assigning contemporary terms and concepts to historical texts or authors is an injustice to them as whole and complex people whose thoughts and feelings about themselves and their work are impossible to know. So while the terms romance and romantic have had many, many meanings and continue to describe aspects of literature and media, romance in this context is being used to describe the capital R romance novels genre. Now, on to my experience with romance novels and how that is in any way relevant to Bridgerton. I'm going to be a little boastful just now, but it's for a reason, I promise. Please know that this hurts my little self-conscious soul way more than it hurts you. I have always been an advanced reader. From the time I was 3 years old, I was willing and eager to read anything that I could. I consumed books. When I skipped class, it was to go to the library. When I was distracted in class, it was because I was reading a book in my lap. I received my bachelor's degree in English literature with honors, with a minor in French literature, and during my time at university, I focused primarily on studying the 19th century novel, with little detours through the 17th century and contemporary marginalized literatures. I wrote many essays. They had such mad and pretentious titles as Out with the Old and In with the Old, Assimilation Anxiety of Jewish Immigrants in the New World as depicted in Adele Wiseman's Crackpot, and Mordecai Richler's The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. This little history of sorrowful interests, loss and love, and the silent narrative space in Jane Austen's Persuasion and Sense and Sensibility. La vérité et la beauté passée. La nostalgie, la beauté et la vérité en du côté de chez Swann, Cyrano de Bergerac, et le colonel Chabert. I was also invited to present a paper at an undergraduate conference in 2011 entitled Who Am I Then, If It Matters? reading the gendered genre of female poetry. It only occurred to me when I was copying these titles out that they are really on brand. So yeah, apparently this is not a new look for me. The point is that my academic pedigree, according to the average ivory tower elitist, is decently solid. People assume, consistently, that because I read classic literature for fun, because I have an English degree, that I must turn my nose up at romance novels. And for many years, that assumption was correct. I'm sorry to say it, but I fell prey to the perspective that smart people didn't like romance novels. If you dared enjoy them, you did it in secret. Romance novels were the cheap, brainless fodder of bored housewives, they were degrading to women, they were pathetic and silly. They were for frivolous people and not real literature. No one who truly loved literature or reading would like these novels, or admit to liking them. But here's the thing, that is some grade A bullshit. Many moons ago, I started reading an online magazine called Book Riot. Among its many qualities, Book Riot's approach to literature is astonishingly democratic. They talk about popular literature, horror, sci-fi, mystery, nonfiction, romance. They also have top quality standards and expectations from their contributors when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Book Riot was instrumental in educating me about my inherent biases with regards to romance novels. We'll get into those biases and why they exist in a minute. But despite this relearning, I had yet to actually read a romance novel until 2019. Every January, Book Riot released a list of 24 challenges, collectively known as the Book Riot Reading Challenge. This list is designed to expand your reading experience and give you prompts for reading that might never occur to you otherwise. On the 2019 list, there was the following prompt: read a historical romance novel written by a woman of color. Blessedly, Book Riot provided a helpful blog post with a list of several novels that fit this prompt. I settled on The Duchess War by Courtney Milan. Courtney Milan is, like many if not most author names in romance, a pseudonym. Her real name is publicly known and even appears on her Wikipedia page, but Courtney Milan is effectively her trade name, and it's the one I will be using. The reason I settled on this novel in particular is because within the post, the author Trisha Brown gives a quick blurb about each novel listed, including something distinctive or interesting about each one. She described one love scene in The Duchess War as, quote, "And there is a fantastic sex scene in which the sex is not fantastic." That was intriguing to me, so I read it. And then the rest of the series. And then the rest of Courtney Milan's extensive historical romance back catalog. And then I started finding other authors like Sebastian and Olivia Waite, and now I'm hooked. This genre is amazing. Not only is it fun to read and I am just eminently spoiled for choice, but it plays host to some of the great character writers and historical researchers in literature today. First of all, I personally have yet to read a romance novel which features a corset worn against the skin. I have also had the great pleasure of learning things from these books, which, upon further research, have turned out to be more true than any of the stretches of the historical imagination that take place in the more exalted literary genres. So why do people who've never read these books, think that they're swill for the ignorant masses, myself formerly included? The reason they're not respected by the larger literary culture can be mostly put down to a single word: sexism. The answer is more complicated, obviously, and this is going to be a very long video if I spend the whole time talking about it, but let's cut to the basics. The large majority of romance readers and writers are female. Whenever anything consists of mostly women consumers and/or participants, it is immediately considered less valuable by society. Nursing, teaching, child rearing, fan fiction, expressing emotions, makeup. In Chapter 5 of Northanger Abbey, Jane Austen breaks the fourth wall and speaks directly as author to the reader in a stunning and effusive defense of the novel as popular entertainment. Many of her points reflect similar conversations today. How often do we feel compelled to use the words guilty pleasure, brain candy, or trash? We might say this about action movies and sci-fi, but men do not feel compelled nearly so often to qualify their enjoyment of media by beginning with, "I know it's garbage, but I love those movies." They just say, "I love those movies." Women are socially pressured to not like the things we like, and if we like them, we are meant to acknowledge that they aren't good, and that we shouldn't like them, even though we do. Just let people like things. It's not that difficult. Is it harming them? Is it harming anyone else? No? Great. Let them enjoy it. Okay, so what does all this have to do with Bridgerton? I doubt it's unprecedented, but at least in my own experience, this is the first time I have seen a romance novel be produced, filmed, advertised, and spoken of in the public discourse with this level of respect and legitimacy, and pomp and circumstance. This is so important because things that are women-centered, like romance novel adaptations, are considered to be less profitable choices for filmmakers and producers. Male-centric media is generally considered neutral in a business and marketing sense. If you were to make two movies which were exactly the same down to the dialogue and the costuming, but you changed the sex of the main character, a fundamental shift would happen in the minds of marketing executives. If something is female-centric, see, it features a woman in the lead role and is mainly about her experience, it is assumed only women will pay for it, which is half the population. If something is male-centric, see, featuring a male character and his experience, then it is broadly considered neutral and having a broader appeal. Everyone is more likely to pay for it. Are you confused? Good. That's how you should feel. This dichotomy makes no sense, but it is the basis for media production and promotion today. For a fun examination of just how many things in our world are considered the male as default for no good reason at all, you should read Invisible Women: Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men, a book by Caroline Criado Perez. Romance novel adaptations, because they are written by and for women, are not considered profitable. They are almost exclusively relegated to things like the Hallmark Channel or similar platforms, which means a small budget and probably significant changes to the content. They are not well thought of and hardly see the light of day beyond that limited niche platform. This is extremely frustrating for many reasons, not least because not all of us have access to the Hallmark Channel, but also because it communicates a pretty clear message that this content is an afterthought at best, serving a limited demographic. If you think there isn't a market for this kind of content on television, you have been grossly misinformed. The romance novel genre is the most financially successful genre of literature year over year and produces an average of 10,000 new titles per year. It outsells the next best-selling genre by nearly 100%. Romance novels are the bedrock of the publishing industry, as well as the main consumer base for subscription services like Kindle Unlimited, because romance readers are power readers, reading more per page and per book than any other group by far. If you use any unlimited subscription libraries, you have romance readers to thank. Without the voracious power users of these platforms, the companies that run them would not be able to keep them running. A lot of romance novels are also self-published on places like Amazon's Kindle platform, and this also sometimes produces a certain amount of derision. Lest we forget that the major studio film release of 2015, The Martian, was a novel originally self-published on the Amazon Kindle platform. And whatever your opinion of the 50 Shades franchise, you cannot tell me that it was anything like a commercial failure, despite its origins as a self-published work. Also, please don't consider this an opportunity to share your opinion about the 50 Shades books. I just don't care. Fundamentally, the issue is and has always been that romance novels are written by women for women, and that the social perception of them as unworthy content makes them a hard sell to film studios, regardless of the huge untapped resource of eager readers and viewers at their doorstep. If producers feel they need a big-budget historical television show event, they are much happier to produce continuous Jane Austen adaptations or absurdly sexified docudramas of period monarchs, as if we didn't already know that Henry VIII had 6 wives. Don't get me wrong, I like Jane Austen adaptations, and I watched The Tudors until Jeremy Northam was killed off. Okay, I say killed off, he was playing a historical figure who was executed in the course of the story as expected. I just like Jeremy Northam. But I'm just saying, we know the story of Henry VIII. Also, can we stop making Emma Woodhouse and Elizabeth Bennet the default roles for up-and-coming actresses who then have to face down every single predecessor of that role? I feel like every time we cast a new Elizabeth Bennet, that poor actress has to look down the line at Jennifer Ailey, Keira Knightley, Aishwarya Rai, and frankly, Renee Zellweger, and think, oh great, I get to be compared to these giants of cinema for the rest of time. These poor women, give them something new to sink their teeth into. If you want to make more classic fiction adaptations, dig out some Wilkie Collins or George Eliot or Amy Levy. Can we please have a 10-year span without having to weigh in on another Jane Austen adaptation? Okay, sorry, where was I? Yes. Serious historical television. Historical drama series are generally about big topics: the rise or fall of an empire, the political machinations of someone, wars and the like. Sex and romance are exclusively treated as opportunities for the male gaze. How many times have you heard a movie spoken well of because among all of the action scenes there was female nudity? After that, sex is usually used to create tensions to serve other plot lines. These women do not have sex drives. If they do, they are antagonists or disposable, and women never, ever. Why would you even suggest such a thing? Women don't like sex. How disturbing. Romance novels, by contrast, give sexual desires and romantic agency to both characters in the featured relationship. The big picture topics or elaborate settings are in service of the characters' relationship with each other. A boxing match, a science lecture, a ball, a public demonstration, these are all perfect settings to layer exterior turmoil with inner turmoil, or juxtapose external Apollonian ideals with Dionysian impulses. But more importantly than all of that, in historical romance novels, intimacy is not ever only achieved with sex. Since the relationship is the story, there's a marvelous amount of attention paid to establishing intimacy between characters in a way that feels both natural and inevitable, without dislodging your willing suspension of disbelief, because we know these characters are going to end up together. The sharing of secrets, the jokes, the intimacy of familiarity, the accidental and harmless transgression of social limitations, these are all elegant and nuanced character development techniques that romance authors fold expertly into their plots. And characters actually talk about sex. Not just while it's happening, but in general, as if it's actually on the minds of the people involved. Go figure. The most we get out of other media in this way is some dubiously consensual kissing, which seems to come out of nowhere sometimes, followed by a few grunts and hums and either fade to black or a very abstract close-up of a stunt double's bare torso. And the rest of the time, if sex is mentioned, it is spoken of in such a roundabout euphemisms that you could safely screen the scene during the height of the Hays Code. And some of the best, most interesting historical research I have ever seen goes into these novels. Not all in equal measure, to be sure, but many personal areas of interest in historical research were kicked off by information I discovered folded into the plot of romance novels. Things like certain kinds of scientific research, unique historical prophylactic, and complicated legal and political effects of the opium trade in the mid-Victorian period. All true examples, by the way. So when I was watching Bridgerton and began to recognize some of the telltale characteristics of the romance genre, I was thrilled. Putting money into a production, advertising it, having it build up to its release, and releasing it at a valuable time of year are all indications that Netflix believed this series to be worth their attention and money. This was not advertised as a niche product. They are not ashamed to be associated with it. They didn't disown it or hide their involvement behind other production companies. The reason is likely the impressive, nigh unstoppable media power and influence of Shonda Rhimes, producer of notable media juggernauts such as Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, and How to Get Away with Murder. But that's what it takes. It's highly unlikely that this book series or any other romance novel would have gotten a production or such a reception without someone of immense influence putting their weight behind it.
I don't seem to have said it anywhere in the video, but I really enjoyed the series. I plan to watch the second season. It was a lot of fun. Also, this series is a stellar example of authors talking frankly and with elegant purpose about historical facts that are taken for granted, but often not addressed in contemporary literature or historical fiction. Like how casual all of the characters treat the inherent double standard of women and men and sexual activity before marriage, and the criminal negligence of depriving young girls of sex education.
According to Netflix, Bridgerton is expected to reach 63 million households within 28 days of its Christmas Day debut, and if that occurs, it will be in the top 5 debut programs for Netflix ever. Bridgerton isn't perfect. Far from it. The videos I referenced before from other CosTubers are worth watching to understand many of the shortcomings of this series. It is always a good idea to look at the things we love with a critical eye. But if you liked Bridgerton, you might like romance novels. I will link some Book Riot reading pathways below, which outline a suggested reading order for certain subgenres or authors of romance novels. Romance novels are as legitimate a literary genre as any other. The recognition of this series by the wider public, I hope, is an indication that it will receive more notice in the future. Just like anything, the romance literary genre isn't perfect. Issues like sexism, homophobia, transphobia, consent, and racism still pervade the industry discourse, as well as the literature itself sometimes. Courtney Milan, the first author I read in my foray into this genre and a personal favorite of mine to this day, for a time the most public victim of some pretty heinous racist insider baseball amongst authors and persons of authority in the romance writing industry. The short version is that the Romance Writers of America, an author-driven professional association, punished Courtney Milan, a woman of color, for speaking out against racism in the works and public statements of a few other white authors. And the RWA, an institution founded by women of color originally, attempted to formally ban her from the organization, with predictably explosive consequences. The full, mind-bending story is summarized by Vox, link in the description. My point in this big video about romance novels and Bridgerton is, like what you like. Own what you like, proudly and without shame or qualification. If we do it enough, I fully believe that the popularity, social conscience, and the accessibility of the media we like will improve and increase. Love what you love, and expect more from those who create what you love. Those who are worth your time will answer the call. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you shouldn't like something if it's not hurting you or anyone else. If it does create some harm, own that too, and see what you can do about reversing it now and in the future. But I am fully of the opinion that all books and media that are consumed generously and thoughtfully can do far more good than bad. So, as I said, I highly recommend seeking out romance novels if you enjoyed the Bridgerton series, because they might be right up your alley. And in the meantime, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, you can buy me a coffee in the link down below to support me in future video efforts. My 1-year anniversary on YouTube is on February 2nd, and I'll be doing a live stream Q&A on that day. Details on the screen and in the description. Toss your questions in the comments, and we'll see how many I can answer on the live stream. There will also be an announcement during that live stream. See you soon! Oh, there is not enough whiskey in the world. Oh, all right, so female masturbation, sex in general, romance novels, yelling at the patriarchy. I think I might have hit demonetization bingo. Oh, we'll see. We'll see. Oh, fingers crossed. All right, see you guys. To which their number. Oh, sentences of Jane Austen are awful. I'm going to be reading this after because my brain hurts. Such is the common cant. For certain subgenres